Okay, hello everyone. As has been said, I'm Jakub Kroustek from Avast. This is Előd, Kironský. We used to be colleagues, but right now it is a joint presentation. And you may be wondering why such silly subtitle of this presentation. To be honest, we already had one presentation about Spora this year during the CARO conference. Maybe some of you attended. Anyone? Oh, great. So I hope you will enjoy it, even this part 2. And the motivation for this presentation is that suddenly after our presentation, everything has changed. Once again, I'm from Avast, previously from AVG. I'm in this industry not that long, for 7 years. I'm mostly interested in ransomware and providing the free decryption tools, but I love also the other kinds of malware.
Hi, my name is Előd Kironský. I've been in the AV industry for 12 years, mostly with AVG, where I started as a software developer, and later on I was responsible for the behavioral detection. And then I was with Avast, and recently I joined ESET as head of core technology development. Oops, sorry.
The agenda of this presentation, as I said, the first part, we need to recap some of our findings from the CARO conference. We will try to make it short, but some of these details are necessary for the later part, where we depict the complete changelog of Spora since its very first version. And because every presentation needs some statistics, right, we will provide some of them.
All right, so why is Spora interesting? First of all, it's one of the first ransomware. That's our new trademark here. And but really, so it started to spread from Russia, which was quite uncommon because most of the ransomwares try to avoid Russia and the post-Soviet countries. So that was one of the things that made Spora really interesting. Also, it was from the beginning of designed to be fully offline, so it never had any CNC servers or whatsoever, and it had a very simple and minimalistic design and an effective code too, and some interesting business models. We will talk about those later. And the most important thing is that they got the encryption right from the beginning. It's not perfect, but it's good enough, so it's so far unbreakable. So this is the recap about spreading. Spora loves scripts of all kinds, JavaScripts, HTA, Windows script files, VBS, you name it. Usually they are spreading Spora in a way that the scripts contain the actual payload, which is the Spora executable, or another script that contains the Spora executable, which is somehow obfuscated. It can be encoded, it can be crypted, whatever. Sometimes they drop from this script also a decoy document just to look more legit. Also, there was a Chrome font or Höfler font campaign that is still in use and still running, that they used to spread the payloads, and they sometimes have creative script usage too. So just pretty quickly, this is the first spreading mechanism that we saw with Spora. It's pretty simple, just a zip attachment in a mail that will drop you an HTA file, that will drop you a highly obfuscated JS file, that will drop you a decoy document and the Spora executable. This is the Höfler font scheme. It's just a trick. They trick the user basically to believe they are installing a missing font. Instead of that, they are basically downloading and running the actual Spora executable. Yeah, and the creative script usage, this may look like a header of a PE file, and it is a PE file, but in the overlay, it has an HTA script. So this was one of the things that they used also, and I don't know why, but this file is an HTA and a PE file in one. You can run it as an HTA. If you see, it will just run itself through CMDC, and it's an actual PE file too.
Yeah, those scripts. Who loves scripts? No one. But what's most important is the PE file, right? What's inside of Spora executable? Most of its versions, Spora behaved like some kind of twisted finite state machine, which tried to travel from the initial state, encrypt some files, do some spreading, and finally exit with your PC being unusable. There was some interesting fact that Spora was able to resume its execution from the last executed state. So it was somehow context aware. How was that possible? Spora used 4 different types of files to store its details about the infected machine and the others. It was a state file, which is our naming, which contains, most importantly, the last executed state. Also the list file, which contained the list of files that will be encrypted or that were already encrypted, the key file with the unique description of each victim, and finally the ransom payment nodes inside of HTML most of the time. Inside of the HTML, there was one important record. We call it victim record, which contained most of the necessary decryption keys. The state file, the first one, was quite easy to be used for detection of Spora, and we did that. It is located inside of your update roaming directory with the name derived from volume serial number of your drive. And inside of this encrypted file, encrypted because Spora, as Előd said, loves scripts, but it also loves encryption, and everything is encrypted. So it contains the last executed state as well as some of the encryption keys. The other file, the list file, contains files that will be encrypted. Spora chooses those files based on their extension, just like any other ransomware. What is interesting about Spora, it will calculate your ransom payment based on a number of files that are encrypted in each group. And the victim record, as I said, this is the pure gold of Spora. It contains the local RSA private key. This is mostly important, this complete record, for ransomware operators to at first calculate your ransom payment, and also after extracting this key, they will be able to provide you a paid decryption tool. Enough about those 4 files. What Spora does with your files that will be encrypted. Spora uses crypto API for everything, started from generation of keys, encryption, export of keys, all of them by using crypto API. So Spora executables are really tiny because there are no other external libraries. The encryption was really solid from the first version. So if I'm correct, there are no free decryption tools available for Spora. No one was able to break it. And there are some glitches in the encryption algorithm used across the Spora code. However, those glitches are just small corner cases that cannot be used for providing a free decryption tool. Each file encrypted by Spora uses a unique randomly generated AES 256 encryption key, which will be after that appended to the encrypted file together with some checksum for checking whether the file was already encrypted or not. So they use some kind of safe coding to protect the files for being re-encrypted again. I skipped some of the states which we've described in detail at CARO because those are not so important. The last state I will mention is the link worm spreading. This is actually nothing new because the malware worms are using this technique for years. It just means that Spora tries to create shortcuts that look alike folders in your on your PC, and if you double click those shortcuts, Spora will be re-executed. So actually those are all shortcuts and those are the original folders. So they really look the same way. By using this method, Spora tries to spread to all local drives, but more importantly to network drives, to flash drives, so everywhere. This was actually quite new for ransomware. So this was worm-like spreading months before WannaCry. So WannaCry was not the first worm in the case of ransomware. I think it was Spora, but maybe there are also the others. Encryption madness used by Spora. Bear with me, please. This will be a little bit technical. I would like to depict how Spora encrypts files. So just imagine you've got your fancy new PC, all your documents, and suddenly you downloaded Spora executable, which contains a config. This config is, once again, encrypted, and it contains, most importantly, RSA master public key. Its private version is only owned by Spora operators. It will never reach the infected PC. And after the execution, Spora will generate a new pair of RSA keys. We call them local keys. Each of them is stored in a different location. The public key is stored inside of the state file, once again encrypted, and the private key is stored inside of ransom nodes. Guess what? It will be encrypted again. This is really overcomplicated by Spora operators. They are using one-time AES key for encrypting this private key, but if they need to be able to decrypt it, so they need to store this key once again inside of the ransom node. But once again, not in a plain form, but this will be encrypted by using the master public key. So that's why it is transferred to the config. So this part is really overcomplicated. We told us so at the CARO conference, and the other day they fixed that. But what Spora really loves to do is to encrypt your files. Of course, it's ransomware. It uses a unique AES 256 key, as I said, for encrypting each file. The key will be stored at the end of the file, and once again, it will be encrypted. Encrypted by what? By the local RSA public key. So, really complex. Everything is encrypted. Encryption is everywhere. The last missing part is how to provide a decryption tool. All you need to do is to go to the payment page by double-clicking that HTML document, and those victim records will be passed by using the HTTP GET or POST request. From there, the authors of Spora will be able to retrieve the RSA local private key by using their master key, and they will be able to provide you the decryption tool. So it's payment time.
Yeah, so Spora authors did everything to have the payment from the UX perspective, improve it, and so that the users don't have to install anything on the victims. Yeah. Don't have to install anything on their computers. The payment side itself is hosted in Tor, and they registered several proxy sites, proxy domains, through which you can very easily access their onion payment site. Yeah, they were also using torifyme.com for some time. And now this is really changing. Now the payment side is really volatile right now because they are changing it. So this is how it looked like at the beginning. Spora just dropped an HTML file that had embedded all the information that they needed to calculate the ransom, to decrypt your files, and so on and so on. There is the unique user ID. And if you go further, you find this really nicely looking page. They had it bilingual. It was in Russian and in English. You see they have a customer support. They had like purchase. You can purchase removal. You can purchase immunity, full restore, decryption, anything. And you are paying with Bitcoin, of course. So this is the past. Then they changed it a little bit. So the initial ransom message looked like this, only in Russian. And when you go further, you will see the payment side has also a slight redesign. They started to use the spora.help@gmail.com email address. And this basically says, drop here an encrypted file, and I will tell you what you need to do. And you get into this side. Notice the change. There are only 3 purchase options right now. So they basically removed the immunity and also, I think, the removal from that package. And everything is in Russian. You cannot change the language back to English. And if you encounter the newest Spora variants, samples, you will most likely see this message. This is an HTA script that will drop this message to you. Probably says contact spora.help@gmail.com. And the reason why it's happening is they use that onion site, that's the payment site, actually in the HTA, and they proxy it through a proxy server that is most likely offline currently, so then they have a fallback to that message. Yeah, and if you go to that onion site, you see basically the redesigned or in progress payment site, I would say, and it has a nice message that says Spora 2.0. So that's the second version. It's non-functional currently. So if you drop an encrypted file there, they will tell you, sorry, an error. We encountered an error. Send us an email to that email address. Okay, so decryption is really simple. The decryption tool is just a self-extracting archive that will drop you basically a decryptor exe, your key that can be used for decrypting all your files, and the CMD file. The CMD file you can see here, really simple because the actual decryptor exe only knows how to decrypt one file. So they basically in the CMD they implemented the enumeration of all the local and network drives and all the targeted extensions, and they try to decrypt every file on every drive, basically. And the most interesting thing is immunization. Until May, it was you were able to immunize your computer against Spora. That's the immunity package there. It was really simple. Basically, you had 2 options. You either could create the mutex that they used, that was generated from the volume ID, or even better, you could generate the state file, and basically you could mark in the state file that you are in the last state, so everything went okay. And then if you place it in the directory, Spora will read it and say, okay, I'm done, so I have nothing to do here.
So, some recap about Spora. I've been digging deeper into Spora, and what I did was that I basically unpacked each Spora executable that we've seen, that means thousands of samples, and extracted the inner packed samples. From there, I tried to extract the compilation timestamp. This may be faked quite easily, but I think that this is not what was done. And I was able to restore some kind of unofficial changelog of Spora's commits. I promise I'm not author of Spora. I don't have access to their Git or whatever repository they are using. So this is only my lame reconstruction. So everything started at the beginning of January, where they released their bomb, new ransomware out there. And what is important to say is that everything was already included in it. At the time, it was using all those 4 files. It was able to wipe your shadow copies. It was able to spread like a worm. Everything was in there. Another interesting fact is that since then, Spora authors are not adding new features. They are just removing them. So they are cutting down the code base into the skeleton, as I will show you. So at that time, there was only a Russian translation, and the only thing they've added was, after a few hours after the initial release, they've added the English translation. So it was bilingual. After that, they were trying to provide test versions with and without the link worm spreading. Sometimes they created a new executable without any changes. And the first remarkable thing that has changed was at the beginning of the February that they removed first of those 4 files. They tried to minimize the footprint of their code to be less detectable. So they removed the LST files with a list of encrypted files. After that, they were trying also to reduce the other file, the key file. They were not able at that time to provide a functional solution, so they removed only part of it. And the complete file has been removed at the end of February together with some kind, I'd say it, release 1.2. They even speeded up the encryption a little bit by removing some code checks. So slicing down something what is really functional. And after that, that was all. For 3 months, no changes. We are quite happy to provide a presentation back at CARO called Spora New Kid on the Block. We really enjoyed the Afterparty at CARO. The band was really great. I'm not sure whether some of them are in here, so the performance was great.
Richard.
And after our hangover, this was probably our expression when we've seen that Spora released just one day after our presentation a totally different and totally updated version. I call it release 2.0. In there, everything has changed. The code similarity measured by BinDiff was like 50%. So they removed or totally redone half of the code. So it was not a minor change. They stopped using, for example, the mutexes. So mutex-based detection of Spora was no longer possible. Well, it was, but it took you much time to track all the versions and all the differences. Also, the encryption of files was really reworked. The content, the structure, the limits, everything was different. They even was able to remove the state file, so one less file, and its content is from now on stored at the end of the encrypted file. So they moved all the content to encrypted files. If you want to log in into the payment site, you need to upload the encrypted file from this version. And finally, they removed also the complete content of the ransom nodes inside of the HTML files, which in this version contained only a redirection to payment site. So they reduced 4 files into 0. So this was a drastic change. We were really shocked. After that, we've been tracking down all the other changes. Előd was quite lucky to intercept another attempt how to minimize Spora's code during June. This is the complete code of that executable, just 5 kilobytes of code, just 5 functions, that's it, nothing more. You've got a fully functional ransomware on 5 kilobytes. How they did so, the trick is that they moved the complexity from executable inside of JavaScript. So the JavaScript dropped this executable, and it also executed Spora by using different arguments like generate, encryption key, encrypt files, and so on. but the main executable only contained 5 kilobytes of code. Really minimalistic. However, they were not satisfied with this solution, so the other day they reverted this change and continued to slice the code in a different manner. So this was the last major change inside of Spora, which we intercepted at the end of July. They removed even more checks. So from now on, Spora is no longer checking whether the file was encrypted or not. They don't care. Also, quite interesting, they removed the English translation. Why would you do so? So from now on, it is once again in Russian only, again. And other changes, they also switched to HTA from HTML because it was trendy at the time between the ransomware authors. And the last change we've noticed is from the end of August, when they released, probably by accident, a build with debug printouts. So you can quite easily analyze what's going on inside of code thanks to their English comments. And yeah, that's it. To show you in a more graphical way what is really changing inside of Spora, this is some graph with number of user functions contained inside of Spora. They started back in January with something like 50 functions, and they are reducing this code complexity from that day up to the 5 functions as I said, but this was reverted, so now they are fine with 20 functions. If you compare that number with the other ransomware strains, such as CryptoWall, Loki, Crisis, those are hundreds of user functions. So Spora is able to do the same thing, but with only minimum number of code. So kudos to them. And what had happened in this math graph? So as I said, the mutex name generation is no longer possible, and its detection. They also removed all of those 4 files and their encryption, so no longer in use. Everything has been moved inside of the encrypted files, so the structure is once again totally different. And they no longer providing a free immunization tool. They don't want to be detected by us, so they had to remove that. But at the same time, they have no product to be sold. So it's up to them. So everything has really changed.
Okay, so I don't know if we have time, but word of warning before statistics. Those are just lies, of course. Statistics per month. These are unique users that where we detected Spora. So you can see in January, Russia stands out. So it was going out from Russia, but right after that, in February, they spread all across the globe, mainly Poland, Spain, Italy, France, and Brazil. Brazil was really, really badly infected. And then they had lower numbers, but basically the graph looks the same. Brazil is always the first. And they had a new campaign in May where the numbers again went up, but still Brazil in the lead, and then fall back to Russia when they removed the English language, and they basically fall back to Russia in June, in July, and August. Summary. We pretty much covered everything what's here. I expect that the Spora authors are preparing for a new campaign. Probably this is of course just speculation, but from what they do with the payment side and with the executable, I pretty much expect that they are preparing for a new campaign, and of course tomorrow there will be a total rewrite because we presented this presentation. So thank you very much. I don't know if we have time for questions, but we are happy to answer